Oh my God, but why on New Year's Day?
There is a sound that stays with you long after you have heard it. It is not a gunshot or a scream or the smash of something breaking. It is quieter than all of those things, and that is precisely what makes it so hard to forget. It is the sound of a pen being clicked once, deliberately, in a room that has gone completely still. It is the sound of a decision already made. It is the sound of a life about to be handed over to someone else, folded inside a manila folder, slid across a kitchen table on the first morning of a brand new year. She was 38 weeks pregnant. She had survived all of it alone. The swollen ankles and the sleepless nights and the 3 a.m. trips to a bathroom that no longer felt like her own body had any business making demands of her. She had painted the nursery herself, choosing the color 3 times before settling on the right shade of pale yellow, the kind of yellow that looks like morning light before the rest of the world wakes up. She had assembled the crib herself, reading the instructions twice, once to understand them and once to be sure. She had chosen a name herself, kept it written on a folded piece of paper in her bedside drawer, the way some people keep a prayer. And on the first morning of a brand new year, at 6:14 in the morning, while the rest of the country was still sleeping off the night before, while the confetti was still on the floor in Times Square and the last few fireworks were still drifting as smoke above 100 different neighborhoods across America, the man she had married placed a document on the kitchen table in front of her, and he told her to sign it. She looked at the paper, she looked at the pen he had set beside it, she looked at him, and then she put the pen down. What happened next would take months to fully unravel. It would involve a second bank account, a business partner, 3 properties in Indiana, a court order, and a text message 16 words long that destroyed everything Daniel Hargrove thought he had carefully hidden. But before any of that, there was just a woman sitting at a kitchen table at 6:14 in the morning on New Year's Day, 9 months pregnant, holding a pen that wasn't hers, and deciding, very quietly, that she would not do what she was being asked to do. That decision would cost him everything. And she never saw it coming, not because she wasn't paying attention, but because she had been, for 3 years, paying attention to the wrong thing. What would you do if everything you believed was yours, your marriage, your home, your child's future, the years you had spent building something alongside another person was taken from you in a single moment? Not stolen loudly, not taken with violence or cruelty or even raised voices, just quietly handed to you inside a folder, on a morning that was supposed to be the beginning of something better, and explained to you in a tone so practiced and so calm that you would spend weeks afterward wondering if you had ever really known the person delivering it at all. By the end of this story, you will understand exactly what Daniel Hargrove had been planning, when he started planning it, and why the one thing he never accounted for was the woman sitting across that table from him. You will understand what Claire found, what her sister found, what a single deposition revealed, and why the moment a court finally got involved, it was already too late for Daniel to walk any of it back. And you will understand why the ending of this story is not what you are expecting right now, sitting here at the beginning of it. Stay with us. Every story like this one has a surface version and a real version. The surface version of this story is a divorce, a marriage that did not work out, a husband who decided he wanted out, and the painful process of 2 people separating their lives and figuring out who gets what. That version is sad. It happens every day across this country, in courtrooms and mediators' offices and kitchen tables, not entirely unlike the one in this story. People get divorced. It is painful, and it is real, and it does not make anyone a villain. But that is not the real version of this story. The real version of this story begins 14 months before that January morning, in a moment that had nothing to do with love or loss or the slow erosion of a marriage. It begins with a business decision. It begins with a phone call, a company formation, and a transfer of funds. It begins with a man who looked at the news that he was going to be a father and decided, within days of learning it, that he needed to move as much money as possible out of a place where it could be touched. The real version of this story has 3 questions at its center, and we are going to answer all 3 of them. The first question is this: who was Daniel Hargrove? Really, before he placed that folder on the table? Not the version his neighbors knew, not the version his firm's website described, The real version, the one that a series of bank statements and a business registration document and one very honest deposition would eventually make visible. The second question is what he had actually done with the money, and for how long, and with whose help. And the third question, the one that makes this story different from a simple account of financial wrongdoing, is what Claire did when she finally understood the full shape of it. Because what she did was not what anyone expected. Not her attorney, not her sister, and certainly not Daniel. 3 questions, 1 story, and an ending that will make you think differently about what it means to win. Claire Sutton grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, the older of 2 daughters in a family that went to church on Sundays and ate dinner together on weeknights, and believed, without much discussion, that if you worked hard and treated people right, things would generally come out the way they were supposed to. She was not naive. She had a practical mind and a careful heart, and a habit of taking her time with decisions that other people made quickly. She studied education at the University of Tennessee, graduated in 3.5 years, and moved to Columbus, Ohio at 26 for a 3rd-grade teaching position at an elementary school in a neighborhood she had picked on a map because the commute looked manageable and the school had a good reputation. She was not the kind of person who moved to a city because it was exciting. She moved to Columbus because it made sense, and because making sense of things was something she had always been good at. She decorated her apartment with plants she kept alive for years and photographs of her family arranged on a shelf above the television and a bookshelf she had painted white herself on a Saturday afternoon in September with the windows open and music playing. She was, by every account of everyone who knew her, a person who built her life carefully and meant it. She met Daniel Hargrove at a friend's wedding in Nashville in the summer, and she was 31 and he was 36. And he was the kind of handsome that takes a moment to notice because it is built on confidence rather than features. He was a commercial architect at a mid-sized firm in Columbus. He wore a good watch and told a story well and had the particular quality that some people have of making whoever they are talking to feel like the most interesting person in the room. Claire had not been looking for anything that weekend. She was there for her friend. But Daniel sat next to her at the reception dinner and they talked for 3 hours and he asked for her number before the cake was cut. She would write about him in her journal that night, in the hotel room, sitting on the edge of the bed, still in her dress. She described him as patient, certain, like he already knew how everything would turn out. She meant it as a compliment. She would remember writing it later with a different understanding of what those words had actually described. They dated for a year. They moved in together after 18 months. They got married on a Saturday in October at a vineyard outside of Columbus with 40 people they loved in attendance, and her sister Mara as her maid of honor, and Daniel's business partner Warren Holt as one of the groomsmen. The photos from the wedding are the kind that look like a magazine because the light was right and everyone was genuinely happy. Claire kept one on her desk at school, next to the coffee mug her students made her at the end of every year with their handprints on it. The first 2 years of their marriage were, by Claire's own account, good. Not perfect. Daniel worked long hours and kept his own counsel about money in a way that Claire had found mildly unusual but not troubling. He handled all the finances. The mortgage was in his name. The investment accounts were in his name. He gave her a joint checking account for household expenses and transferred money into it every month like clockwork, and she had not pushed for more than that because there had never been a reason to, and because she trusted him. And because trust is the thing you do not think about until it gives you a reason to. She had noticed in the 2nd year that he sometimes came home from work in a mood she could not name. Not angry, not cold, just somewhere slightly behind a door that she could not quite reach. She had assumed it was the job. Architecture is a field full of difficult clients and delayed projects, and the particular frustration of having a vision that other people control the budget for. She had given him space when he needed it, and she had not asked questions she did not think she was entitled to ask. She had been, she would say later, a good wife. She had been, she would also say, too accommodating about the things that deserved a conversation. In March of the year before New Year's Day, Claire found out she was pregnant. She was 33 years old, and it had taken them 2 years of trying, and she sat in the bathroom at 6 in the morning holding a test and cried for 10 minutes from relief. She went downstairs and found Daniel at the kitchen counter with his coffee, and she showed him, and he set the coffee down and held her, and she felt, in that moment, that everything was going to be all right. that whatever distance had existed between them in the second year of the marriage was going to close, that the baby was going to be the thing that brought them back to each other completely. She would tell her sister later that Daniel had seemed genuinely happy that day. She believed that. She would spend a long time turning it over, trying to find the seam in it, trying to identify the moment when the happiness had shifted into something else. But she could not find it. What she eventually came to understand was that for Daniel, those two things were not mutually exclusive. He could have been happy about the pregnancy and already planning his exit at the same time. That was the part of him she had never fully seen. That was the door she had never reached. Mara Sutton, Claire's younger sister, had never fully trusted Daniel. She was a paralegal at a family law firm in Knoxville, and she had spent enough years watching marriages come apart in conference rooms to have developed a particular sensitivity to certain patterns. She had noticed the way Daniel handled money. She had noticed the way he managed information, the way he answered questions with adjacent answers instead of direct ones, the way he was always slightly more polished in public than he was in private. She had never said any of this to Claire directly because Claire had not asked, and because saying it without being asked felt like a betrayal of the choice her sister had made. But she had kept it filed somewhere quiet, the way you keep an umbrella in the back of a closet on a sunny day. Warren Holt was 44 years old and had been Daniel's business partner for 6 years. He was the operational side of the firm, the contracts, the billing, the client relationships, while Daniel was the creative side, the designs, the presentations, the face the firm put toward the world. They had built something together that worked, and Warren had trusted Daniel in the way that business partners trust each other when the numbers are good and the work is steady, and no one has given them a reason to look more closely. Warren had been at the wedding. He had given a toast. He had a wife and 2 kids in the same suburb as Daniel and Claire, and had been, as far as Claire could tell, a perfectly decent man. She would revise that assessment, but not in the way she expected. By Christmas of the year after the pregnancy announcement, Daniel had become withdrawn in a way that Claire now named differently than she had named it before. Before, she had called it stress. In December, watching him sit at the kitchen table after dinner, staring at his phone with the expression of someone doing a calculation they did not want to share, she called it something else. She did not have the word for it yet. She would have it soon. He suggested they stay home for New Year's Eve. No party, no dinner with friends, no drive to her parents in Knoxville. He said she needed rest. She was 9 months pregnant, and she agreed that she needed rest. She did not think to wonder why he was also so certain they should be alone. She would think about that later. She would think about a lot of things later. But on December 31st, she made dinner and they sat across from each other and he barely spoke. And she watched a movie she cannot now remember the name of while he sat in the chair beside the window and watched something on his phone with his earbuds in. At midnight, she reached for him and he turned his face slightly, just slightly, and said he was tired. She went to bed. He stayed at the kitchen table. He was there when she fell asleep. In the morning, he was still dressed. He had never come to bed. She woke at 6 in the morning to the sound of movement in the kitchen, which was not unusual. Except that when she came downstairs, Daniel was in a suit and tie. Not casual clothes, not the weekend dress of a man who had simply gotten up early. A full suit, the dark charcoal one he wore to presentations, with a tie she did not recognize. On New Year's morning, before 7 a.m., she asked him where he was going. He said he was not going anywhere yet. He asked her to sit down. She sat at the kitchen table. He placed a manila folder on the table beside her coffee cup, which he had already made for her, decaf, the way she had been drinking it for 8 months. That detail the coffee already made, exactly right, would stay with her. It is the kind of thing you do when you have rehearsed the morning, when you have run it in your head enough times that even the small gestures are scripted. He told her their marriage was over. He said it in a tone that she would later describe as the tone of someone reading a statement they had not written themselves but had memorized completely. Measured, considered, without a single crack in it. He said they wanted different things. He said he had been unhappy for a long time. He said this was the best decision for everyone involved. He used the word everyone. He meant himself. The folder contained dissolution of marriage papers. They were already dated. His attorney's name was on the letterhead. The attorney was in Columbus, which meant Daniel had hired someone local, someone who did not know Claire, someone he had been communicating with long enough to have documents prepared and ready to present on the first morning of January. There was a pin clipped to the inside of the folder. A good pin. The kind of pin you give someone when you want the signing to feel official. She was 9 months pregnant. Her next OB appointment was in 4 days. The baby's room upstairs was painted pale yellow, and the crib was assembled and a name was written on a folded piece of paper in her bedside drawer. And her husband was in a suit at 6:14 in the morning asking her to end their marriage before their child was born. She asked him to explain. He gave her the prepared speech again, restating the same points in a slightly different order. The way someone does when they're not actually responding to a question but finishing a presentation. She asked about the baby. He said he would fulfill his financial obligations. That phrase, fulfill his financial obligations, is what she remembered afterward more clearly than almost anything else. Not, I will take care of our child. Not, I am still going to be her father. Fulfill his financial obligations, as though the child they had tried for 2 years was a line item. She asked him if there was someone else. There was a pause of approximately 1 beat, the kind of pause that is not quite long enough to be damning, but is also not quite short enough to be innocent. Then he said no. She watched his face when he said it. She would not have called it a lie, but she would also not have called it the truth. She did not cry. She had not yet reached the part of this where she would cry, because she had not yet fully understood what she was looking at. She looked at the papers. She looked at his handwriting on the signature line, already signed, already dated. She looked at her own name typed above the blank line that was waiting for her. She looked at the pen, and she put the pen down. She slid the folder back across the table without a word. Daniel looked at it. He looked at her. He said she was making this harder than it needed to be. She said she would like him to leave the kitchen. He stood there for a moment in his charcoal suit with his rehearsed calm, and then he picked up the folder and walked out of the kitchen. And she listened to his footsteps cross the living room and go up the stairs and then come back down. 10 minutes later, and she heard the front door open and close. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that. The sun was not up yet. The coffee was getting cold. She put her hand on her stomach. The baby was moving, the way the baby always moved in the morning. Small determined movements, like someone turning over in their sleep. She sat there until the sky outside the window over the sink began to change from black to gray to the pale, uncertain light of a January dawn. And then she picked up her phone and called her sister. Mara answered on the second ring, which meant she had been awake. Claire said 3 sentences. Mara said she was leaving in 20 minutes. Daniel had planned for many things. He had planned the papers and the attorney and the date and the speech and the pen. He had planned the finances and the accounts and the company structure that we will come to shortly. He had planned, apparently, for almost every variable in the situation he had constructed over the preceding 14 months. The one variable he had not planned for was Mara Sutton, paralegal, arriving at the house before he had finished packing a bag. They met in the driveway, Daniel with a duffel bag over his shoulder, Mara getting out of a car that had driven 2 hours in the dark. They did not speak for long. Daniel called her intrusive. Mara said nothing in response to that, which is a particular kind of response that tells you everything about who has the better hand. He got in his car. She went inside. And the thing that Daniel Hargrove had built over 14 months of careful preparation began, from that moment, to come apart. Before we go any further into what Mara found and what it meant and where it led, let us pause for just a moment. If you are watching this from somewhere in the United States, or anywhere in the world for that matter, we would love to know where you are. Drop your location in the comments below. And if this is the kind of storytelling that keeps you coming back, make sure you have hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. We have more stories like this one, and some of them are going to make this one look like a quiet afternoon. Now, let's talk about what was inside that second bank account. Mara Sutton had spent 6 years as a paralegal at a family law firm in Knoxville that handled on average 24 divorce cases at any given time. She had sat in depositions. She had organized discovery documents. She had watched attorneys find the things that people believed were unfindable, and she had watched people who thought they had hidden something well discover, usually in a conference room with bad lighting and worse coffee, that they had not hidden it well enough. She knew what financial concealment looked like. She knew where to look and what questions to ask and how to read a document that had been designed to obscure what it was actually saying. She walked into Claire's kitchen on New Year's morning and she did not ask about the marriage. She did not ask about Daniel or what he had said or how Claire was feeling. She asked Claire where the bank statements were. Claire looked at her. Mara said, "Every statement you can find, every account, every piece of paper with a number on it, go get it now." And Claire, who trusted her sister in the particular way that you trust, someone who has been right about the things that mattered, went and got them. What they found in the first hour sitting at the kitchen table together was this: a joint checking account, a joint savings account, and a mortgage statement, all of which were familiar to Claire. And then, filed behind a folder of appliance warranties at the back of a cabinet drawer, a set of statements for an account Claire had never seen before. The account was in Daniel's name only. It had been opened 14 months earlier, in the same month that Claire had told Daniel she was pregnant. The balance on the most recent statement was not remarkable. There was not a lot of money sitting in it. What was remarkable was the transaction history. Over 14 months, more than $340,000 had moved through that account. It had come in from the joint marital accounts and transfers that were large enough to be significant but small enough not to trigger an automatic review. And it had gone out again, in chunks, to an entity whose name appeared on every outgoing transfer and nowhere else in any document Claire had ever seen. The entity was called Holt-Hargrove Properties LLC. Holt, Warren Holt, Daniel's business partner, the man who had given a toast at their wedding, the man who had 2 kids in the same suburb and a wife who sometimes had Claire over for coffee on Saturday mornings. That Warren Holt. Mara put the statement down on the table. She did not say anything dramatic. She did not need to. She picked up her phone and called a colleague at her firm, a family attorney named Denise, who specialized in asset tracing and high-conflict divorce cases, and who owed Mara a favor from a case 2 years earlier. She explained what she was looking at. Denise said she would call back in 40 minutes. She called back in 30. Holt-Hargrove Properties LLC had been registered with the state of Ohio on a Thursday in March, the same Thursday in March that Claire had gone to her first OB appointment to confirm the pregnancy. The company had been formed, as far as Denise could determine from the public registration documents available, within days of Daniel receiving the news that he was going to be a father. It had 2 listed members, Daniel Hargrove and Warren Holt. Its stated purpose was real estate investment. Its registered agent was an attorney whose name Denise recognized from 3 previous cases in which assets had been moved in anticipation of a divorce proceeding. Claire sat at the table and listened to Mara relay all of this, and she felt something she would later describe not as anger but as a particular kind of clarity. The kind of clarity that arrives when you finally understand the shape of something you have been looking at for a long time without being able to name it. The withdrawn evenings in the second year of the marriage, the finances kept solely in his name, the carefully managed joint checking account, the practiced calm of his speech that morning. None of it had been about the marriage failing. All of it had been about a plan that had already been in motion for over a year. Mara called Denise back and asked her to recommend a family attorney in Columbus. Denise gave her 2 names. Mara called the first one. They had an appointment for the following Tuesday, which was 4 days away, which was also the day of Claire's OB appointment. Claire would go to both appointments that week. She would not cancel either one. Daniel, in the meantime, had sent 2 emails and a text message requesting that Claire engage with his attorney regarding the dissolution papers. His attorney had also sent a letter, formal and cordial, explaining the timeline Daniel's side was proposing and the reasons a prompt resolution would be in both parties' interests. The reasons listed were financial and logistical and made no reference to the pregnancy. Claire's attorney, once retained, advised her not to respond to any of them directly. In the days that followed, Mara continued pulling on the thread. The properties. That was the next question. What had Holt-Hargrove Properties LLC actually purchased? The public records were available if you knew where to look, and Mara knew where to look. Over 14 months, the LLC had purchased 2 residential rental properties in Indiana, both in the same county. Both purchased through a separate single-purpose LLC that was itself owned by Holt-Hargrove. The purchase prices totaled just over $600,000. The deeds listed Warren Holt as the sole signatory. Daniel's name did not appear on either deed. That was the design of it. That was what the attorney, whose name Denise recognized, had built. A layered structure in which Daniel's fingerprints were technically absent from the property records, while the money that had purchased those properties was traceable, if you look carefully enough, back through Holt-Hargrove, and back through the second bank account, and back through 14 months of transfers from the joint marital accounts. It was not an impenetrable structure. It was a structure that was designed to hold long enough. Long enough for what? Long enough for a divorce to be finalized before anyone looked closely enough to find it. Claire's attorney filed a motion for financial discovery within 2 weeks of being retained. The motion requested full disclosure of all accounts, assets, business interests, and entity memberships in which Daniel Hargrove had any ownership or beneficial interest. The motion named Holt-Hargrove Properties LLC specifically. It also requested the deposition of Warren Holt. Daniel's response, through his attorney, was that the LLC was a legitimate business venture entirely separate from the marital estate, that the funds used to capitalize it had been earned post-separation from the marital finances, and that Warren Holt's involvement was that of an independent investor with no material connection to the Hargrove marital finances. It was a story. It was a specific, detailed, carefully constructed story, and it might have held, in a different case, with a different opposing attorney, and a different paralegal sitting at the kitchen table who had not spent 6 years watching exactly this kind of story fall apart in deposition. Claire's attorney issued Warren Holt a deposition notice. This is the part of the story where, if you have been paying attention, you might be wondering about Warren Holt. You might be wondering what kind of person helps his business partner move marital assets into a shell structure to deprive a pregnant woman of her rightful share of a marriage. You might have a word for that already. You might be thinking that Warren Holt is the second villain of this story, the enabler, the person whose cooperation made the whole scheme possible. You would not be wrong to think that. But you would not be entirely right either, because when Warren Holt sat down for his first deposition, what came out of that room was not what anyone expected, and it changed the entire shape of the story. But before we get there, Claire went into labor. It was 4 days after New Year's Day. The baby was not early. The baby was, in fact, exactly on time, as though she had made her own decision about when to arrive and stuck to it. Claire's water broke at 4 in the morning, quietly, without drama, in the way that some of the most significant moments of a life begin. Mara drove her to the hospital. Daniel was at a meeting with his attorney 40 miles away, which is the kind of detail that requires no additional commentary to make its meaning clear. Mara was in the room. She held Claire's hand through 11 hours of labor, and she told her sister jokes that were not funny enough to make her laugh, but were exactly right in the way that the jokes a sister tells you are always exactly right. Not because of what they are, but because of who is telling them. The baby arrived at 3:17 in the afternoon. She weighed 7 pounds and 3 ounces. She had Claire's eyes and a full head of dark hair, and she came into the world making the particular noise that newborns make. The noise that has no equivalence in any other experience. That sounds like someone insisting, loudly and without apology, that they have arrived and they intend to stay. Daniel came to the hospital that evening. He stood in the doorway of the room for a moment and then came in and washed his hands and held the baby. He held her for 11 minutes. Claire timed it. She did not know why she timed it. She just did. He looked at the baby with an expression she could not entirely read. He did not speak to Claire. He put the baby back in the bassinet and said she was beautiful and left. The baby's name was Wren. It had been written on a folded piece of paper in Claire's bedside drawer for 4 months. 3 days after Wren was born, Claire's attorney filed the motion for financial discovery. Mara photographed every document Daniel had sent in the preceding 2 weeks and provided copies to the attorney. The Holt-Hargrove LLC went under legal examination. And then came the depositions. The first deposition of Warren Holt lasted 3 hours. He arrived with his own attorney, which was the first indication that this was not going to be a simple proceeding. He answered questions carefully. He acknowledged his role in Holt-Hargrove Properties LLC. He described the entity as a legitimate investment partnership entered into voluntarily with Daniel Hargrove. He said the funds used to capitalize the LLC had been Daniel's personal investment, accumulated through his individual business earnings. He said nothing that materially contradicted the story Daniel's attorney had put forward. At the end of the first deposition, Claire's attorney thanked Warren Holt for his time. The following week, She filed a subpoena for his personal financial records going back 3 years, and a request for all electronic communications between Warren Holt and Daniel Hargrove related to any financial transaction or entity formation during the same period. Warren Holt's attorney objected to portions of the subpoena. The judge sustained some objections and overruled others. The electronic communications were ordered to be produced. The second deposition of Warren Holt was shorter than the first and more uncomfortable. There were now documents on the table that had not been there before. Text messages, emails, transfer records. Warren Holt's answers became less crisp. There were more pauses. There was one moment, approximately 90 minutes in, when Claire's attorney placed a specific email in front of him and asked him to read it aloud, and he read it and then set it down and asked if they could take a brief recess. They took a brief recess. When they returned, his attorney asked to speak privately with opposing counsel before continuing. That private conversation lasted 40 minutes. The third deposition of Warren Holt was not, strictly speaking, an adversarial deposition at all. By the time they sat down for it, Warren Holt's attorney had communicated to Claire's attorney that her client wished to provide a full and cooperative account of the Holt-Hargrove structure, its origins, and its purpose. What that meant, in practical terms, was that Warren Holt was no longer defending Daniel Hargrove's story. He was telling a different one, his own. The story Warren Holt told under oath in the third deposition was this. Approximately 18 months before New Year's Day, he had discovered that Daniel had been skimming from the firm's operating account. Not a small amount, not a rounding error or an expense account irregularity, a systematic diversion of client billing receipts, spread across dozens of transactions over a period of nearly 2 years, totaling somewhere in the range of $400,000. Warren had found it during a routine reconciliation process. He had confronted Daniel directly. Daniel had not denied it. What Daniel had done instead was offer Warren a partnership, the properties, the LLC, a structure that would give Warren a legitimate financial interest in something real in exchange for his silence about the skimming. Warren had taken the offer. He would say in the deposition, in a moment that was not quite an apology but was the closest thing to one the proceeding allowed for, that he had told himself at the time that he was protecting the firm, protecting their employees, protecting the clients. He would also say that he knew, sitting there, that those were not the only reasons he had taken the deal. He had taken the deal because it was financially advantageous, and he had known, at some level he had not examined closely, that what Daniel was building the LLC to do was not legitimate. The text message Daniel had sent Warren 16 months before New Year's Day was produced into evidence at the third deposition. It had been retrieved from Warren's phone records through the electronic discovery order. It read, in its entirety, "She is pregnant. We need to move the money now. All of it. No punctuation. 16 words." Sent at 11:47 at night, approximately 6 hours after Claire had come downstairs with the pregnancy test in her hand. Claire's attorney read the text message into the record. She asked Warren Holt to confirm that he had received it and that the sender was Daniel Hargrove. He confirmed both. She asked him what his response had been. He said he had called Daniel the following morning and they had begun the process of forming the LLC within the week. She asked him if he had understood, when he received that message, that the purpose of moving the money was to place it beyond the reach of a future divorce proceeding. He paused for a long time. Then he said yes. One text message, 16 words, and everything Daniel Hargrove had carefully constructed the story, the paperwork, the business justification, the timeline he had presented as plausible, collapsed in a single afternoon. Because the text message did not describe a business investment decision. It described a man who had learned his wife was pregnant and had decided, within hours, that his first priority was moving money away from her. The child he would hold for 11 minutes in a hospital room had not yet had a heartbeat confirmed, and he was already planning the exit. The revelation about the skimming from the firm's operating accounts created a separate set of consequences. Claire's attorney shared the deposition transcript with the firm's managing partners. They opened an internal audit. Within 6 weeks, the audit had confirmed Warren's account. The diverted funds were traced. Daniel was placed on immediate administrative leave pending the outcome of the review. A criminal referral was made to the county prosecutor's office. And here is the part of Warren Holt's story that reframes everything you may have thought about him since the beginning of this account. He was not, in the end, Daniel's partner in this. He had been, for 18 months, Daniel's captive. He had agreed to a bad arrangement to protect himself and then watched it become something worse than he had agreed to. He had spent those 18 months knowing that a pregnant woman's financial future was being quietly dismantled with his assistance, and he had not done anything about it. That is not a clean record. That is a serious moral failure. But it is a different thing from what Daniel did. Daniel built the trap. Warren was caught in it long enough to become part of it. And when he finally saw a door out, he walked through it. He handed the prosecutors exactly what they needed. The man Claire had watched in the driveway on New Year's morning, the man she had considered a partner in her husband's betrayal, turned out to be the person who ended it. The divorce judge issued an order freezing the Holt-Hargrove LLC's real estate holdings pending the full financial review. By the time the discovery process was complete, the total value of assets that had been moved through the structure was established at just over $1.2 million. 3 additional properties had been purchased beyond the 2 Mara had initially found, bringing the total to 5 properties held across 2 Indiana counties. All of them were generating rental income. None of that income had ever been disclosed to Claire. The criminal investigation moved forward separately from the civil divorce proceedings. The county prosecutor's office reviewed the referral from the architectural firm and opened a formal investigation into financial fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Daniel retained a criminal defense attorney in addition to his divorce attorney, which gives you some sense of how quickly the situation had expanded beyond the scope of what he had planned for. He had planned for a divorce. He had not planned for a deposition that produced a 16-word text message. He had not planned for Warren Holt to walk through the door that the 3rd deposition opened. Daniel's criminal defense attorney negotiated a plea agreement. He pleaded to a reduced charge, avoiding a prison sentence, and received probation and community service, and a structured repayment schedule for the funds that had been diverted from the firm. His architectural license was suspended for 3 years, pending the outcome of a review by the state licensing board. The firm, which had been operating under the weight of the audit findings for several months by this point, dissolved. Daniel moved out of Ohio. His social media accounts, which had previously shown photographs of construction projects and youth baseball games, and a neighborhood that looked very much like the life he had wanted people to believe he was living, went quiet and then went dark. He pays child support. He pays it on a schedule that Claire's attorney drafted and that he signed without challenge. He visits Wren according to an arrangement that Claire's attorney also drafted, and he does not fight that arrangement, and he shows up when he is supposed to show up. That is the version of him that remained when everything else had been stripped away. A man who shows up on schedule. It is not nothing, but it is a long way from what he had presented himself to be. Now, here is the part of this story that surprised everyone who heard it. Claire's attorney had, by the time the civil divorce proceedings were in full motion, a substantial and well-documented case for maximum financial recovery. The hidden assets, the fraudulent transfer structure, the text message, the firm skimming, the Indiana properties, all of it combined to create a picture of deliberate and extended financial misconduct that a family court judge would have had considerable latitude to address through punitive measures in the divorce. Settlement. Claire's attorney advised her to pursue that path. Her sister advised her to pursue that path. Most people, presented with the evidence of what had been done to them, would have pursued that path. Claire did not pursue that path. She negotiated a settlement, primary physical custody of Wren. The marital home, mortgage transferred entirely to her name. A structured support arrangement covering Wren's expenses through her 18th year. A clean separation from the Holt-Hargrove LLC holdings as they were liquidated through the court process, with her entitled share of the marital assets returned through that liquidation. She did not push for punitive damages. She did not extend the proceedings beyond what was necessary to secure those terms. She signed what she needed to sign, and she stopped. Her attorney was, by her own account, genuinely surprised. Mara was furious for approximately 2 weeks. The people who heard about it and had followed the case called it too generous, too reasonable, a failure to extract what had been earned through the magnitude of what he had done. Claire heard all of it. She considered all of it, and then she said something that has stayed with everyone who heard it. She said, "I am not going to spend the next 5 years of Wren's life in a courtroom. I am going to spend the next 5 years of Wren's life with Wren." People who heard that decision called it too generous. People who understood it called it the most powerful thing she could have done. Because pursuing maximum punitive recovery would have kept Daniel at the center of Claire's story for years. It would have made him the ongoing subject of every conversation, every filing, every court date, every phone call with an attorney. It would have made him the thing her life was organized around. And Claire Hargrove had decided, somewhere on the far side of New Year's Day, that she was not going to organize her life around Daniel Hargrove anymore. She went back to teaching in September. Her classroom is 2 miles from the house she kept. Rin was in a daycare 2 blocks from the school, and Claire walked her there in the morning and picked her up in the afternoon, and they went home together every day to the house with the pale yellow nursery and the crib Claire had assembled herself. Mara visited once a month and was Rin's godmother, and occasionally still said things about the settlement that Claire ignored, with the particular patience of an older sister who has been ignoring her younger sister's opinions for 30 years. Warren Holt sent Claire a handwritten letter of apology. He wrote it on personal stationery, not firm letterhead, which she registered as a deliberate choice. The letter acknowledged, specifically and without excuses, that he had known what was being done and had done nothing about it for too long. He did not ask for her understanding. He did not ask for anything. He simply stated what he had done and said he was sorry for it. Claire put the letter in a drawer. She did not respond to it. She did not throw it away either. Some things do not require a response in order to be received. Rin was 18 months old by the time this story became something that could be told. She had said her first full sentence 2 weeks earlier. It was 3 words, delivered with great conviction and a pointed finger at the refrigerator. And it was about wanting something to eat. Claire had laughed about it for the rest of the day. That is the specific texture of the life that exists on the other side of New Year's Day. Not a triumph, not a restoration, just a mourning and a child who is hungry, and a mother who laughs at the right things. Daniel Hargrove spent 14 months building a structure designed to make his wife financially invisible. He did it carefully, with legal assistance and a business partner and a layered company formation and a set of divorce papers already dated and a pin already clipped to the folder. He did it with the confidence of someone who had controlled the information in his marriage for 3 years and had no reason to believe that control would not hold through a divorce proceeding as well. He had planned for almost everything. He had not planned for Mara arriving before he finished packing. He had not planned for a paralegal who knew what a second account opened the week of a pregnancy announcement meant. He had not planned for a colleague at a family law firm who answered her phone on New Year's Day. He had not planned for Warren Holt, who had been his instrument for 18 months and then became the person who handed prosecutors the 16-word text message that ended the story. And he had not planned for the most important thing of all, a woman who put a pen down. Claire Hargrove did not survive what happened to her because she was extraordinary. She survived it because she was, in a very quiet and very specific way, herself. She had spent 3 years being accommodating about things that deserved a conversation. She had been patient where patience was not warranted. She had trusted in ways that were not returned. And when the morning came that showed her the full shape of what she had been living inside, she looked at it clearly. And then she made the next right decision. And the next one after that. And the one after that. Daniel Hargrove believed on the morning of January 1st that he knew exactly how everything would turn out. He had been described that way once in a journal entry written by a woman who meant it as a compliment, patient, certain, like he already knew how everything would turn out. As it happens, he did not know. He had confused a plan with a certainty, and he had confused control with understanding. And those are errors that tend to become visible only when someone puts a pen down. Here is what I keep coming back to about this story. Daniel Hargrove had 14 months to change his mind. 14 months of deposits and property transfers and firm meetings and evenings at a kitchen table across from a woman who was carrying his child, and not once in all of that time did he stop. He coached Little League on Saturday mornings. He held the door for people. He gave a toast at a retirement dinner for a colleague and was described by someone who was there as warm and generous with his words. He was all of those things, and he was also, at the same time, doing what he was doing. And I find that more disturbing than any version of this story in which he had simply been a monster from the beginning. Because if he had been a monster from the beginning, you could explain it away. This way, you cannot. What does that tell you about the kind of person he was before any of this started? That is the question I want you to sit with. Not whether he was punished adequately, not whether Claire settled for too little, not whether Warren Holt deserves any sympathy. Those are all real questions, and they all have legitimate answers. But the one that stays with me is the earlier one, because most of us will never encounter a Holt-Hargrove LLC or a fraudulent asset transfer structure. Most of us will never be handed divorce papers at 6 in the morning on New Year's Day. But most of us will, at some point in our lives, encounter someone who has the particular quality of seeming to already know how everything will turn out. And maybe this story is useful for that. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me whether you think Claire made the right call with the settlement. Tell me where you were when you first understood what Daniel had actually done. Tell me what you would have done differently, if anything. These are the conversations that make this kind of storytelling worth doing. And I read more of your comments than you probably think I do. And if this is the kind of story you come here for, real people, real decisions, real consequences, told the long way because some stories are too complicated to rush, make sure you are subscribed, because I have more of them. I have a story about a woman who discovered her husband had been living a double life for 11 years. 2 cities, 2 mortgages, 2 families who did not know the other existed, and neither family found out until the day he had a heart attack in the wrong house. That story is coming, and it will make this one look like a quiet afternoon. I will see you then.